All right, excellent. Great to be with y'all. So tonight we're going to kick it off by talking a little bit about variety selection and planting. And I'm going to start out with a little disclaimer, and that is small grains are quite a diverse lot in this area. We can have everything from small grains grown for forage, small grains grown for grain. We can have dry land, we can have irrigated, we can have different types of wheat, different and oats and triticale and all sorts of things. And so there's going to be a lot of generalities, but I think the principles that we'll talk about here extrapolate across any type of small grain that you might encounter. This is a famous racehorse. Some of you may recognize this animal. This is a horse by the name of Secretariat. This is one of the all-time greats. You know, it's one that can go out and won a lot of races. Some would argue this is the greatest horse of all time, but not all horses are like Secretariat, though. Let me see if I can, oops. This is Porky Pete, the pasture ornament. This horse may, in its heart of hearts, Porky Pete may have a really big heart. You know, he really wants to be a great racehorse. And so he may go out and he'll work out and run around the track and eat a great diet and do all sorts of great things. But no matter how hard this horse tries, he is never going to be able to hang with Secretariat in a race. And why is that? It's all related to genetics. You know, people like me, I'm an agronomist. I absolutely love talking about agronomy. I love talking about how to fertilize, how to control weeds, how to irrigate, how to control diseases and pests and all sorts of things. And that's you know, those are all important things, but no management can overcome poor genetics. And agronomy is the environment here, and genotype, that's your genetics. So when we're choosing small grains, there's an awful lot of things that we need to think about. The number one is yield potential. The last time that I checked, we all sell small grains for either grain or for forage by the ton or the bushel. And so yield is absolutely critical in this decision. But we've also got critical things such as pest resistance, the quality of the grain that we produce, or forage quality. You've got how much moisture is required to grow this particular crop. You got the winter hardiness. Will it survive the winter and cold temps? We've got how well will it establish? When does it head? Is it going to lay down or lodge? And how tall does it get? All of these are important criteria to weigh, and there's even more that we have to look at. So it can be pretty complicated in choosing the correct variety. So the challenge that we all face is trying to find performance data from multiple test locations, because we want to be able to base our choice on how things actually perform. We love to get our hands on data sets with lots of varieties tested across multiple locations. That'll give us a good feel for how well these perform across sites. We should always emphasize locations within your latitude, elevation, or adaptation zone, but also it's important to not hesitate to use data outside of your zone, because we can actually learn quite a bit from that. So when we look at variety testing information, the first thing you'll notice is that there can be a tremendous amount of difference in yield across these different varieties. It's not uncommon to see like a 0 to 40% yield difference in the performance of various varieties. And when it comes to disease traits, we can see complete annihilation of a variety due to bunts and rust. And so it's important to pay attention to that. At USU, our variety testing information is posted at the website, the USU wheat website, which is there on your screen. But I think it's also important to pay attention to variety testing information from surrounding states. Idaho has a really good wheat commission that supplies money to the University of Idaho to variety test extensively. A lot of similar environments in Idaho, and so that's a great source of information. But depending on where you are, you can look into Colorado and other states that may have similar environments. Also, don't overlook the importance of on-farm testing. I think it's always good to have your line in the water, looking for that next variety that you'd like to give a shot to, and plant the farm to whatever variety that you've currently settled on, but always be experimenting and have a little bit of seed that you plant of that next thing that you're looking at to see how it'll do compared to what you typically grow. When you look at variety testing information, you may see something like this, and my purpose in showing you this is just to illustrate how to look at variety testing information. So this is a 4-year average of an irrigated trial in Logan. And you can see I've got 5 varieties on here. And you'll notice that the yields vary from about 142 bushel down to about 80 bushel. And so when you look at this kind of thing, you might be tempted to say, well, Bruno was the highest yielding variety, therefore this is the one that I'm going to plant on my farm. I think you're better off to look at the top group, because you'll notice there's really not a whole lot of difference between between these varieties. And then once we take this yield information and then we start digging down into things like disease resistance, test weight, protein, lodging potential, and all those kind of things, we may discover that that one of these others may be the one that would really fit well in our particular operation. So don't just grab the yield winner, but take that top group and then start to investigate from there. I think that's a good strategy. Now, one thing that can happen is we can often get we also get infatuated by or caught up in the cost of seed. And I know a lot of people make decisions on what we plant based on how much the seed costs. And so I wanted to show you this next slide to help put seed cost into perspective to performance. So let me go back up. Okay. So let's say, for instance, that I grow garland on my farm, and I'm nervous to take the next step to grow one of these other varieties because the other variety, let's say it costs $10 more per hundredweight for me to buy. And I think there's no way that's going to make any sense. If this, all I've done here is I've taken the difference in yield. So I've set garland I've basically subtracted the yields of all these other varieties from garland where it was the lowest yielding in that particular trial. Then I've multiplied by the price of wheat at $5.50 a bushel. And so this would be the difference in return, the additional gross return by growing a higher yielding variety. Now, check. So even the next closest would be an extra $60 an acre. Here's one that would be an extra $160 an acre. And you can see that these top varieties would be, about $350 extra gross return per acre by growing this variety over the lowest yielding variety. So this dotted line, this is showing you the cost that this is that extra $10 increase in seed cost, an extra $10 a hundredweight, which we sometimes think is as insurmountable, but you can see in the big picture, it's actually very insignificant. And so I would suggest that, really, I don't really, seed cost is really not important in the big scheme of things. The most important thing is the performance of the variety, because a high performer will make up for that seed cost many times over. Plus, this extra $10 an acre is actually a pretty good return. If I can invest $10 an acre and make $350 an acre in the course of time that a small grain crop is growing out in the field, that's a pretty darn good return when you consider the alternative of putting money in your bank account at 0.002% return. Okay, so another reason that we want to plant good seed is the fact that sometimes seed can come with surprises. It can come contaminated with things, and one of the things that's often a contaminant in small grain seed is weeds. And I like to talk about this is a seed analysis report from an old drill box survey that we used to do, where we would go around and actually take seed out of people's drill box randomly around the state. And then we would send it to the Utah State Department of Ag, and they would analyze it for us. So this happens to be oats. And you'll notice, looking at this analysis, that it was 99.47% pure seed. So you may look at that and say, holy cow, that's excellent. I love it. Let's plant it. But then let's look down here at what else is going on. So we have, right here, you'll see that we actually had some barley. We had 1 barley seed, a sweet clover seed, and 2 wheat seeds in this particular sample per pound. Then we come over here and look at weed seeds, which is a very minor component, but we had barnyard grass, green foxtail, 143 pigweed seeds, some wild mustard, some sunflower even. I mean, this is almost like bird seed that this person happened to be planting. And this is per pound. So you can imagine if we multiply this by 100 to get our normal seeding rate, we're planting a heck of a lot of weed seed out there that's probably going to cause us some headaches down the road. So plant good seed, good clean seed, get certified seed with the blue tag, and you'll know that it's clean and free of weeds. Okay, now let's move into planting dates. So planting date is often based on the weather or the harvest of the previous crop. The rule of thumb for planting fall small grains is 1 week before to 1 week after the expected first fall frost. That's what we target, but it's totally flexible based on the weather conditions of the year. This is kind of a compromise between planting too early and planting too late. We're planting it early enough that we get some adequate fall growth, but we're planting we're planting late enough to decrease the diseases, the insects, and things that can happen when we plant too early. So when we're planting fall small grains, the early planting dates, we can see higher fall disease incidence, things like barley yellow dwarf, the take-all. A lot of things become more pronounced when we get a lot of vegetative growth in the fall, a lot of green. That can cause bigger disease problems the next year. We also have the potential for excessive fall growth, and when we have too much growth on a small grain in the fall, we get more winter injury, and there's greater risk of spring frost damage as a result of that. Not to mention the fact that, often if we plant too early, we may not have soil moisture conditions good enough to germinate a crop like we did in much of the state this year. When we plant too late, we can we diminish that crucial period of fall growth, that time when we need to get the crop up and start to put on some leaves and some tillers. We miss that, and so that's going to ultimately hurt our yield the next year. We reduced our winter survivability because those plants are so small that the likelihood of them getting picked off by cold temperatures are likely. A lot of this is because of heaving, where the soil temperatures warm and freeze, and they're just not the roots there to hold them in place. Because of this, we see reduced stands. We can also see delayed maturity in the spring, and finally it translates into reduced yield potential. What about spring plantings when we're planting a spring grain? There was an old dry farmer that farmed around where my parents' farm was, and I remember him telling my dad once. He said, if you're not planting through snow drifts when you're planting your spring grain, you're too late. And so I've always kind of used that as just a, he's obviously exaggerating a little bit, but the idea is you want to be as early as you can on those spring grains to take advantage of the cooler temperatures and then the moisture conditions that we have that are a lot more favorable to cool season small grain type production. Okay, planting depth. The optimal planting depth for a small grain is 1.5 inches. This is when we have adequate moisture. When it's dry, we will try to plant down into the moisture as best we can. So when we plant deep, we experience delayed emergence. It just takes longer for the crop to get up. The vigor also goes down, just the enthusiasm of the crop, the hello world type. When it gets up out of the ground, it's kind of sickly, it's not doing well, and it just burned a lot of energy getting up through the soil. We'll see reduced stands quite a bit, and reduced tillering. So a lot of bad things can happen. What about shallow planting? Well, if we go less than 1.5 inches, we often see poor germination and uneven emergence, and that's because it's really hard to keep the soil uniformly wet in that top 1/2 inch. It dries out too quick, and then you'll end up with patches or random plants here or there that grow. You're going to experience more winter injury because your crown is going to develop above the soil surface, and it's exposed to freezing temperatures. We're also going to be more susceptible to heaving, to frost heaving, due to the freeze-thaw cycle because the root system is shallow. Now let's talk about seeding rates. So when we have high seeding rates, we can expect more lodging. We also get more disease, and we have higher seed costs. When we have low seeding rates, we get lower yields. We often see more weeds. We get excessive tillering, and we don't have any flexibility for plant loss if something bad happens. Now, this being said, I'm fully aware that there's a broad range of environments where we grow wheat in this state and in surrounding states. We do research. This is at Snowville, dryland wheat country. That combine is going in road gear cutting, and just really low yields in that environment. But they can grow wheat in that low precip area, all the way to these high yield, high irrigated type environments where it's kind of a totally different ball game. So again, we're gonna talk in generalities here. Mostly, I'm going to talk about optimum yields that are for irrigated conditions, knowing that in dryland situations we do have to back off those a little bit. So our goal for optimum yield, highest yield with good moisture conditions, is to have 30 to 35 seeds per square foot. We want to have about 1.5 million seeds per acre. The minimum optimum stand needed to get 100% yield is 25 plants per square foot. This is a spring count, like right as the snow leaves. If we have 25 plants per square foot with 2 to 3 primary stems or tillers per plant, we know that we're set up in terms of stand to have a great yield. We want to have about this should hopefully produce 60 to 70 heads per foot with about 35 kernels per head and 1.5 million plants per acre final stand. So this is just kind of showing what happens when we have different levels of stand. So if we have 100% stand, we have 30 to 35 plants per foot, 100% yield potential. When we have about 25 plants per square foot, that's about 80% stand. So we lost 20% of our seeds. We still have 100% yield potential. When we drop down to even a 40% stand, check this out, 12 to 14 plants per square foot, we still have 60 to 70% of our yield potential because of the ability of wheat to compensate for that and send up multiple stems or tillers from the same plant. And then finally, a 20% stand has only 6 to 7 plants per square foot, and you still get about a 50% yield. on something so low because of the ability of that plant to compensate. So how do you determine weight seeding rates? Well, you can either use volume or weight. Most people use volume. Well, sorry, most people do use volume or weight. So we'll plant, you know, a certain number of bushels per area, or we will plant, you know, 100 pounds to the acre, or 55 pounds to the acre, or 130 pounds to the acre, whatever it is. We often base it on weight. I'm going to try to make a case today that maybe we ought to start thinking a little bit about the number of seeds per unit area, the number of seeds per square foot that may actually be a little bit more accurate. So why is that? Well, because seed size differs. I can have a lot of seed with 10,000 seeds per pound if I have large seeds, or I can have 20,000 seeds per pound if I have small seeds. So if I have one, but one seed equals one seed, and it has the ability to produce one plant, whether it's a large or a small seed. So we can learn what the seed size is based on the seed tag. You can also measure it if you don't know it. But here's where this is important. So if I want to have 35 seeds per square foot to have optimal yield, and variety A has large seeds, 10,000 seeds per pound. That means to get that seeding rate, I need to plant 152 pounds per acre. If I have variety B, which is small seeded, 18,000 seeds per pound, I only need to plant 85 pounds per acre in order to get my optimal yield. Do you see why that's important? Because that seed size, we need to start thinking in terms of how many seeds we're planting per square foot, just because of the differences in seed size. So,
Earl, just to cut you off real quick, you have about a minute left or so.
Okay, cool. I will wrap it up. So if I have a seeding rate at 110 pounds per acre, variety A with 10,000 seeds per pound, we'll end up with 42 pounds short of what we needed to get our optimal rate. We'll only plant 25 pounds to the acre, so we're going to be short. And then conversely, if we do that same thing with the other variety, we're actually going to plant 35 to 40 plants per square foot, which is greater than the optimum. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and